I'm going to teach you how to throw the discus with the rotational technique, and we're going to start right now. What's up, everybody? I'm Dane Miller from throwsuniversity.com, and if this is your first time to the channel and you're interested in learning how to improve your glide technique, you want to enhance your rotational technique for the shot put and the discus, make sure you like, you subscribe, and you ring that notification bell so we can help you become a champion. So oftentimes throws coaches have tons and tons of different ways that they're teaching the rotational technique for the discus, and it can be very, very complicated. There's muddied waters around the technique that you should be using when it comes down to the discus technique that we want to optimize to throw far. And one of those big issues that we see is that coaches will make it very, very difficult to understand their actual technique and their actual prescription of technique and how they go about doing it. And that can create a very difficult perspective for the athlete to understand where they need to be working towards. And one of the biggest things that we pride ourselves on is keeping it simple and making it very easy to digest and understand how to throw the discus. And so if we can think about that 8-foot plus circle here, and we've got our feet a little bit wider than shoulder width, we want to start with a nice little wind. We want to analyze this as a side-by-side movement to keep it simple. And one of the easiest ways and the easiest methods that we like to utilize is, if we're talking specifically about right-handed discus throwers, is we want to think about that right leg sweeping wide around that left leg. So it's the right side sweeps wide around that left leg. And when that right leg will sweep wide around that left leg, it will then ground in the middle. So the right leg will ground in the middle. And as it's grounding in the middle, the left leg will sweep around that right leg. So that left leg will sweep to the front around that left leg. Or just prior to that left leg grounding, now that right side, that right shoulder, the right upper body will transfer forward and go around that left side. So that's one really easy way to think about it, is it's literally just a side to side based movement. The right side goes around the left side, the right side grounds, the left goes around the right, and then the right goes around the left on the finish. Another simple way to look at it is looking at it as going over, around the left, forward to the middle. When our right grounds in the middle, now we're gonna go forward into the left leg and around the left leg on the finish. A little bit more detailed, but we like to think about it as a side-based movement. The right leg should go around the left leg to the middle. When the right leg is grounded in the middle, the left leg goes around the right leg to the front. And then on the finish, the right side will go around the left side on the finish. We like to use this very simple key model as a way to develop technical perspective and technical understanding. I'm gonna teach you how to properly hold the discus, and we're gonna start right now. This is a channel completely dedicated to developing discus technique, to developing a shot put understanding of the glide, a shot put understanding of the rotational technique, and anything else related to throws based training. Make sure you subscribe and ring that notification bell. So over the last decade, we've had tons and tons of beginner throwers come through our doors here at Garage Strength. We've had thousands of athletes working with us on throwsuniversity.com, and a lot of them will bring up the question, how do we properly hold the discus for an effective release? And I think that a lot of times that throwers get confused because it's made to be so complicated, and it does feel a little awkward when you're holding the discus. It tends to feel like it might fall out, but we need to establish that grip and establish some confidence. So we're gonna go over some very simple aspects behind how you hold the discus and how you can apply it to your training. Every single 60-meter discus thrower that I coach currently tends to throw one of two ways. They're either going to hold the discus where their fingers are just over the edge. And we can almost see that backwards L here in that right hand. So if we can think about having the discus with our fingers just over the edge, our discus throwers are either gonna hold it this way, or they're gonna put their fingers together, their first two, their index finger and their middle finger together. I believe that is 100% based around choice, based around comfort. The big key is that we don't want to be holding the discus here. We don't want to be grabbing here. We don't want to be fearing that it's going to drop out. We've got to trust ourselves. We've got to understand that we want to hold the fingers just over the edge of the rim. And if we want to be more comfortable with 2 fingers together here, that's perfectly fine. Some guys might like to move that pinky out if they like that better. I tend to think, you know, again, it's up to personal preference. The big key, don't grab it. The second big key, understand that momentum is what's going to get us to have a nice release, okay? If I'm not moving the discus, if I don't move my body, my torso here or my hand here, the discus is going to fall out. But if I'm moving my arm, the discus will not fall out. It should not fall out. And it's going to take hundreds and hundreds of reps for throwers to get confident. And we like doing simple drills just like this right now. We're going to throw that discus up, catch it, and repeat. And we want to think coming off of the index finger and the middle finger, or just the ring finger if we like the traditional spread apart grip right here. So when we're going to start with doing our standing throws, our beginner throwers will always take anywhere from 5 to 7 simple stands. We've got to watch and make sure that that discus is spinning away from the body, okay? So it should be released and it'll come off of that index finger and spin away from the body. It should not spin towards the body. The easiest thing to do, a lot of athletes, a lot of coaches love to use bowling games. I think they're okay to a point where they'll roll out in the sector and they'll watch, you know, they'll play games and see who can roll the longest. Those are okay, but it doesn't mimic the way the hand is, and it doesn't mimic the tension in the shoulder. I think the easiest thing to do, and my high school coach did this and I thought it was fantastic, was to go out in the sector and you would take 15 to 20 foot standing throws. Just nice and easy flick, and you'd flick to find that comfort, to find it rolling off of your hand. And it might take some throwers 50 throws, it might take some throwers 5 throws, but play around, get out in the sector. You have nice, easy flicks coming off of that index finger. Some people, if they hold together here, they might come off the middle finger as well. But we've got to recognize that it's all about comfort. It's also all about momentum. When we get to that full throw, beginners tend to have a little bit of a hesitant position. They might bring that right hand forward. We've got to establish the movement early on. We have to let the athlete, let the thrower feel confident in what we want them to do in the circle. We have to have them feel confident on how it's coming out of their hand when they're doing those standing flicks. And I recommend you take 5 to 10 standing flicks with beginner throwers early on. And then right after that, we start to establish that movement in the circle, because the sooner they get comfortable in the circle, the sooner they're gonna get comfortable releasing that discus, and the less wobble they're gonna have, and the less likely it'll be to come off their pinky when they're starting to release. So just be aware of watching how the discus spins. It should come off and rotate away here instead of rotate towards. And we've got to make sure that we're holding our hands just slightly with our fingers over that rim weight, okay? Don't harp one technique over the other. Harp comfort, harp feeling tension and momentum, and that is what's going to lead to a growth in that discus thrower. It's all about comfort. We want to constantly, tell them to hold it here or tell them to take a stand a specific way, but we've got to coach up comfort with our key principles. We're going to dive deep into the topic of strength training for the discus throw, and we're going to start right now. So did you ever go to throws practice and have to run a mile? Maybe you get to practice and you're sitting there and your coach has you warm up, you jog 2 laps, you do this really long warm up, and then you have to run another 2 to 4 laps around the track after practice is over. And you're sitting there wondering, why do we have to do this? What does this have to do with throwing? And this is a very valid question, because you can take a step back and you can start to analyze what exactly goes into the discus throw. So we're throwing a 1.6 kilo implement or a 1 kilo implement if we're women, and if we're post-collegiate or collegiate, we will be throwing a 2 kilo implement. So it's not that heavy of an implement. And now we can take a further step and say, all right, well, where is this happening? It's happening in about an 8-foot circle, and it's going to occur in a very short time frame, about 2 to 3 seconds. And say, all right, what does strength training entail, or what does sports performance training entail when we're talking about the discus throw? And right away, one of those key factors that we have to dive into when we're discussing this complicated topic is what energy systems are being used. We know that there's 3 main energy systems. There's an anaerobic alactic, there's anaerobic glycolysis, and there's aerobic oxidative. And so right off the bat, we can start to think about anaerobic alactic. This energy system is going to be utilized for about anywhere from 10 to 20 seconds at a given time. And a lot of these things we've got to remember is that they all will sort of overlap to a point. Okay, anaerobic glycolysis will occur anywhere from 15 seconds to 2 minutes. So again, they will sort of overlap, and then we can talk about aerobic oxidative. This will be anything where around 45 seconds, this is really going to start to support the anaerobic glycolysis system. And so from an energy perspective, when we're talking about energy systems for the discus throw, we know that this is mainly what we'll be using when we're executing a throw in competition. We also know that the alactic system is likely what we should be training the most, but we also know that the glycolytic system is what's going to help boost the anaerobic alactic system. So we have to think about all these systems sort of work hand in hand, but these two are the main systems that we need to focus on. We know that for the most part, we will not be using the aerobic oxidative system when we are doing the discus throw. Now, that doesn't mean that taking those half-mile jogs are completely worthless, but for the most part, they are, because this is the system that we're going to be working with for the most part, along with that glycolysis system. And so when we set up training, now we can start to take that next step and we can start to say, hey, strength training for discus, what should that entail? Now we have to look at the actual movement of the discus throw. So when we start to look at the elements that we need in regards to the actual discus throw, we can start to think about it from that top-down view. We know that in the sport of the discus throw that you have to have very good technique. You have to be able to execute the movement as rapidly as possible. You need to be able to accelerate that implement as quickly as you can in the confines that you are provided. So you're given that 8-foot circle, you have to accelerate as rapidly as you can so that you can throw as long as you possibly can. So you have to have technique. So in your strength training for the discus throw, we know that you need to have some semblance of technical coordination. We need to have complex movements that will transfer really well to the discus throw. Something that can fall under the lines of the technical coordination would be an Olympic lift. Let's just say you have something, you have a nice starting strength right off the floor, so starting contraction right off the floor. Then you have to have force absorption when you're catching a clean. Then you have to have a reactive component, so you have to react quickly and recruit as fast as possible and accelerate up through the finish of the entire movement. So we know that when we're throwing, that technical coordination is needed by the athlete to throw further. And when we're in the weight room, we can also train that key element of technical coordination by using different variations of the Olympic movements. We also know that absolute strength can transfer to help improve technical coordination. We know that absolute strength also can help us be a little bit more dynamic. It can help us improve how we absorb force in different positions. So if you think about in the discus throw, when the right leg of a right-handed thrower will ground in the middle, if the thrower is stronger, they can absorb that force more effectively. And as they get to the finish, they can then reuse that energy more effectively because they have higher levels of absolute strength. So we've got to think about with absolute strength, dynamic strength falls under that umbrella, maximal strength falls under that umbrella. And then we can lead into that next big one. We know that discus throwers, especially women, need to be very, very mobile in their thoracic spine. They need to be very mobile in their trunk, very mobile in their hips. They have to be mobile. Men and women have to be very, very mobile when they're throwing the discus so that they can hit a deep position and then they can have a longer path to accelerate that implement through the finish. And again, that can lead us back into some technical coordination movements. We can use movements like the snatch, and we can pause in the hold to try and open up that thoracic spine. We can also do mobility exercises during our training or after our training to constantly help us increase that passive flexibility while also improving our stability in each of those joints that we need to improve. And then finally, we have to have some ability of special strength. So special strength can be defined as basically mimicking the actual throwing movement and then taking the movements that are typically associated with the weight room, say a power clean, a snatch, a push press, all of these technically coordinated movements. And now the bridge to get them into the circle is that special strength movement. So maybe we're doing some side banded standing throws. Maybe we're doing some side med ball throws. Some simple special strength movements that now our body can start to learn how to coordinate and learn how to recruit the muscle fibers and the motor units that we've triggered through absolute strength training and through technical coordination. So all of these elements are absolutely key to improving our discus throw. On top of that, all of these elements can be trained inside of these two energy systems. So when we take that step back even further as athletes and as coaches, now we can take this as a blueprint and we can say, all right, we've got to have some semblance of technical coordination. We've got to have a little bit of absolute strength. Maybe we have some accessories in there. We can finish out with some mobility work, or we can even find some movements that can train mobility and special strength at the exact same time. And that's where all of this stuff pieces together so that we can ultimately improve the distances that we are throwing with the discus. And if you struggle to piece this together, you don't fully comprehend how to put together a full unified strength training program for the discus, you can click on the link down below. We're gonna provide you with 2 free training days so that you can learn exactly how a full program would be laid out. You can click on the link down below. It's going to take you over to our website. You're going to input your email and then you'll wait a couple seconds and we'll send you that email that has those free workouts so that you can further understand what you need to know when it comes to strength training for the discus throw. I'm going to give you the 4 best strength exercises for throwing the discus, and we're going to start right now. And you want to become a better coach. You want to become a better thrower. You want to learn the technique of the discus, the shot, even the hammer. You want to learn how to train for these different events. Make sure that you like, you subscribe, and you ring that notification bell so that we can help you become a champion. So at Throws University, we get asked questions all the time like, hey Dane, I want to know what are the best strength exercises that I can do to increase my throws in the discus. And I think that these questions, they're perfectly fine, right? And they go a long way, but we've got to understand the actual physical keys behind throwing the discus. It's not as easy as, hey, do this exercise and your discus is gonna get better. We've got to think about it from the perspective of what actually happens when we're throwing the discus. When we're throwing the discus, there's going to be a lot of forces generated. There's going to be a lot of very deep mobile positions that we're going to be hitting. There's going to be a rapid rate of coordination. There's going to be a technical aspect behind it. There's going to be a lot of speed at the finish of the throw that we've got to learn how to control while we're trying to finish that discus throw. So there's a lot of different keys that go into throwing the discus far. And ultimately it comes down to who can coordinate the fastest, who can have the best technique so that you can coordinate the fastest, and then who can control the power that you've created by having good technique and by having rapid coordination. And that is precisely where the strength exercises come into play. The strength exercises are going to be there for us to learn how to control that rapid coordination, to learn how to control our speed, and ultimately to help us sit big and have a monster finish so that we have a bigger discus throw. So diving right into it, let's start at that number 4 spot. I like to use the back squat, and I like to use every variation possible behind the back squat. I like my throwers, my discus throwers, to squat ass to grass. We've had Sam Mattis, a world championship finalist, who's back squatted 285 kilos. I've also had Sam and all of my other discus throwers, including 2016 Olympian Alex Rose, do partial squats. Do other variations of squats, do safety bar squats, anything along these lines. We've even had Nick Arrhenius, who's recently thrown 66.46, hitting a PR at the age of 38, also a 2008 Olympian, work with simple exercises like Spanish squats or goblet squats. And so what I like to utilize is the back squat predominantly. And all of this goes back to what are those key elements? The back squat's going to help us develop that rapid coordination in other movements like the Olympic lifts. It's also going to help us develop really nice trunk stability in the middle of the circle. And on top of that, it's going to help us have that strength so that we can control our technique to have a monster finish at the front of the circle. Coming in at that number 3 spot, we've got the bench press, and I'm sure a lot of people are grumbling right now. Really? The bench press? Like, you really think the bench press is that good for throwing the discus? You're not lying on your back. And one of the things with people saying stuff like that, it doesn't make sense. Dr. Anatoly Bondarchuk, who I happen to train under for a year living in Canada, has done the research. He's shown that the bench press has a very significant transfer to discus throwers even over 60 meters. So they've seen that if your bench press goes up, your discus throw is likely going to go up. So it's important that we have a nice and strong bench press. And so I think that a lot of this factors into, one, we're gonna have a really strong shoulder girdle, and two, we're gonna have really, really strong pecs. And if we can think about, even with that closer grip bench press, now all of a sudden our humerus is going to be back behind our shoulder quite a bit more. That's going to mimic the position the discus is in when we're hitting the front of the circle. Now our chest can handle that tension, and we can continue to coordinate and accelerate through that finish, and that's going to lead to that big throw that we're all wanting regarding the discus throw. And we use the bench press predominantly with all of our discus throwers. Sam Mattis has benched over 500 pounds. Alex Rose has benched over 500 pounds. So a lot of our top end discus throwers have done really, really well training with a big bench press. Coming in at that number 2 spot, we got pull-ups. So a lot of people forget, one of the big important aspects behind throwing the discus is making sure that our shoulder girdle is mobile, making sure that our thoracic spine is mobile so that we have nice thoracic extension, and we have strong thoracic rotation as well so that we can catch that discus nice and deep. But on top of that, so that we can carry the discus well out of the back into the middle of the circle. And that's one of the things behind pull-ups, is we've got to think about a couple different factors here. One, training pull-ups is going to lengthen our lats, especially if we're training dead hang pull-ups. Two, it's going to help with structural stability, with structural integrity. If we are training the bench press, we've got to make sure that we're also training those antagonistic muscles, the lats, the rhomboids even to a point. And so that's going to help us a lot with having a nice stable back, and that's going to help us transfer over really, really well. But ultimately, it still comes back to that mobility that we want to hit. So if you're hitting those pull-ups, a lot of throwers make excuses about doing pull-ups, that we're heavier. We don't want to do pull-ups, but it's really, really important, and the carryover is very, very high. If we can hit pull-ups, we can lengthen our lats, we can be a little bit more structurally sound, and that's going to help us to control the speed at the front of the circle. Before we get into that number 1 exercise, if you guys want more information around strength training, or you want a strength-based program provided by Throws University, head over to throwsuniversity.com. You can click on the link down below, and you can pick up a strength-based training program that's going to help you quite a bit to increase your discus throw. So that number 1 strength lift is the single leg squat. And a lot of people might be blown away by, wait, single leg squats, really? Yes. A lot of the throw is going to be done on one leg, and we've got to have trunk stability when we're on a unilateral position, when we're on that single leg position. So when we're coming out of the back of the circle, we've got to be able to have nice dynamic trunk control as our right leg sweeps around the left. We've got to be stable. And on top of that, training a single leg, training unilaterally is going to help us sort of iron out any weaknesses that we might have on our left side if we're a right-handed discus thrower. That is where we're going to see a huge carryover, is that the stronger our non-dominant side gets, the better it can decelerate at the front of the circle. So think about that left leg hitting a nice, slightly bent left knee. Think about Robert Harding. His left side has to be strong enough to handle all the forces that the right side and the left side have created throughout the throw. So a lot of that energy is transferring into his transfer leg. If we remember, that left leg, that is not the block leg, that is known as the transfer leg. So all of that energy is transferring into the transfer leg. So it's got to be really, really strong in a unilateral position. And if you look at the finish of the throw in the discus, the left leg's forward, the right leg's back, it's almost exactly looking like a split squat or a split jerk. So you're in a very unilateral position. Now we put that back leg up on a roller, and we're able to develop a lot of strength and a lot of trunk stability as well when we're in that unilateral position. So I love training single leg squats because it also carries over to the way that your right leg grounds in the middle of the circle. If you're in the middle of the circle, think about that half turn position. Now you can handle that speed in the middle and you can continue to accelerate, and then you can get to that left leg, the transfer leg at the front. You can help decelerate from the left side as the right side accelerates to that big monster finish. So if you want a program that utilizes all of these lifts, you can head over to throwsuniversity.com and you can pick up any custom strength or pre-built strength training program to help you drop bombs in the discus. We're gonna cover the bench mark lifts that you need to throw 150 feet if you're a high school male in the discus. And we're gonna start right now. What's up everybody, it's Dave Miller from throwsuniversity.com. And if this is your first time to the channel and you're interested in being more explosive, you're interested in improving your throws technique, you're interested in improving your throws based training, make sure that you like, subscribe, and you ring that notification bell so we can help you toss some bombs. So we get asked all the time at Throws University, hey, what do I need to bench press to throw this far? What do I need to back squat to throw this far? And we need to take that step back, right? We need to take a step back and first just analyze. If we're talking about the discus specifically, we need to know what is actually needed to throw the discus far. We know we have to be very mobile in our upper back. We want to catch that discus nice and deep so that when we get that non-dominant leg grounded at the front of the circle, we have a long, big pull. We feel nice tension across our abs. We have that mobility in our upper back to lead to a stronger finish. We know that we have to be strong. We have to have absolute strength so that we can handle a ton of force when we're at the front of the circle. We also know that we're in unilateral positions when we're grounding in the middle of the circle, so we need to have some serious unilateral strength. We also know that we need to have a rapid rate of coordination, so that's going to entail some other different factors. So all of these factors play into the development of becoming an elite level discus thrower. But as we work up the ranks, maybe you're in 9th grade, you're in 10th grade, you're a younger high school discus thrower, and you want to know what it takes just to qualify for states or to make that state final. Now we know what those elements are, but what does that mean for actual weight room data? How can we get to that next level? Now we're going to dive deep into those numbers so that you have a nice blueprint of where you need to go to become a 150-foot discus thrower. So starting off, we're talking about the snatch, okay? So we know that our upper back is going to have to be more mobile if we're doing snatch work. If our upper back is more mobile, we're gonna catch that discus nice and deep. If our hips are mobile, we're also going to have a better stretch from our left hip to our right hand. We're gonna have more mobile hips that leads to greater trunk tension. That trunk tension leads to a better reaction. We're gonna have a stretch shortening cycle all the way across our abs. And that's where the snatch comes into play. So when we're talking about throwing the discus really, really far, we've got to know that you've got to incorporate the Olympic lifts in your training. You've got to utilize the snatch. That doesn't mean that you need to start off and just start hammering as heavy weights as possible. It means there's a technical aspect. And when you can switch your mind from being that meathead high school kid to being a little bit more technically minded, and you can build and improve your technique. Now, when you build and improve your technique in the snatch, that's going to lead to discus technical improvements as well. But so what is that number? If you want to throw 150 feet in the discus in high school, you should be able to snatch 175 pounds. So if you can snatch 175 pounds or about 80 kilos, you have the strength and the ability to coordinate rapidly enough that you can ultimately hit that 150-foot discus throw, and that's going to get you to place in the top 8 at your discus state championships. That next key lift is going to be the clean, and we know when you're grounding in the middle, when that right side hits, you've got a lot of force that you also have to absorb in your strong leg. You've got to absorb that force in your trunk. You've got to be able to control that force absorption and reuse that energy effectively on the finish. And that's where the clean comes into play. When you're catching that clean, you learn how to absorb force very effectively, but you also learn how to develop it off the floor. Maybe you're even catching that clean in the hole and you're coming out of the hole really, really rapidly. That's going to help improve your hip mobility, your lower back mobility. That's going to lead to better throws ultimately long term. And so if you want to throw 150 feet in the discus in high school, you've got to clean at least 235 pounds. So 235 pounds or about 107 kilos. Those are the numbers that you need to put out and to strive towards if you want to make that state championship final. Now let's get into some upper body work. We've got the bench press. A lot of coaches will say, oh, bench press is so overrated. But I've got a little story for you. When I trained under the world-class Olympic champion, Dr. Anatoly Bondarchuk, he followed a ton of 60-meter discus throwers. And these discus throwers, as they increased their bench press over 180 kilos, the more they got to 180 and then over 180 kilos, the likelihood of them throwing 60 meters or about 196 feet, the likelihood increased. There was actually a better transfer from the bench press to the discus based off of his research than there was from the bench press to the shot put. Okay, so the bench press correlates really, really well to the discus. We've got to think about, even if you have a little bit more of a closer grip, now all of a sudden our humerus is getting nice and deep, and when our humerus is nice and deep, we're going to have a really big stretch on our pec. Now if we can think about that inside the circle, now we take that humerus and we just extend our arm. That's where the discus needs to be when we're grounding at the front of the circle. So we need to have the ability to handle that big stretch across our pecs. Now with the bench press, if you want to throw 150 feet, you've got to bench press 275 pounds. That's a pretty reasonable bench press. It's nothing crazy, but it's very, very reasonable. It's also still a pretty solid bench. It's about 125 kilos. If your bench isn't there yet, I recommend 5 sets of 10 to 15 push-ups every single night until you're hitting that 275 pound level. And when you hit that 275 pounds, now all of a sudden, your likelihood of throwing 150 feet is going to be that much higher. Now that takes us into our back squat. So we know that if you're going to be squatting with a high bar back squat, okay, that's the other key factor is here. We have to establish, sadly, what a back squat is. We want a high bar position. We want our trunk to be more upright. We want to have full range of motion. We want our glutes and our hamstrings draped over our gastroc, okay? We want that hip mobility. We want that lower back mobility. We want that posture. Okay, think about the posture of the back squat. Now think about grounding in the middle with that right leg in the middle and being a little bit more upright. Now we can have that left side rotate around the right side. That's where the back squat comes into play. Okay, so on top of that, the back squat also helps us hold that finish position at the front. It helps us rotate into our transfer leg. So when we're hitting better positions at the front and we have more absolute strength, we can hold higher levels of energy. Another key factor with the back squat, the snatch, the clean, they will dramatically improve because of our strength in the back squat. So if we improve the back squat, we will see an improvement in the snatch and the clean. And when we see an improvement in the snatch and the clean, we're also going to start to see a really big improvement in our throws. So the back squat is almost covering 3 different movements. And that's a really, really important factor. Now, what number do we need to hit? If we're hitting 300 plus pounds, or about 137 kilos, if we're hitting those weights in the back squat, we should be capable of throwing 150 feet. That's gonna get us to that state final. That's potentially gonna get us our first state medal, and we're gonna feel a lot better about that work that we put in the off season. Now, before we get into that front squat number, a lot of these numbers are hard to follow. And also, what if you want to throw 130 feet? Maybe you want to throw 175 feet or 190 feet. Maybe you want to throw 65 feet in the shot put. Where can you find all of this information? If you click on the link down below, you can head over to throwsuniversity.com. You can pick up our Ultimate Throwers Assessment. And we have all of these benchmark numbers laid out so that you know exactly what you need to do in the off season to work towards, so that you know where you're at in the weight room in relative comparison to where you're at in the circle. You can see where your weaknesses are, you can formulate a nice program, and you can strive to lengthen that PR over and over again. Now that leads us into our final exercise, the front squat. And so a lot of high school kids like to avoid the front squat. They don't like the feeling on their wrists or their elbows, or maybe their lats are really tight, their triceps are really tight. But do this for me. Roll out your lats, roll out your triceps, do some mobility work throughout your wrists. And if you still can't front squat like a bodybuilder. I might make fun of you a little bit, but not a ton, okay? Front squat like a bodybuilder. Make sure you're getting that full range of motion. And the reason why I recommend this is the carryover of that core stability is off the charts. The front squat is one of the best ab exercises that you could ever do. Now, think about this with a clean. If we front squat more, our clean is gonna go up. It's almost the exact same movement, right? If we front squat more, the back squat's gonna go up. So now we start to see how all of these weights and all of these different exercises are interchangeable. They can feed off of each other. They work synergistically. And so if you can front squat 275 pounds, you're gonna be able to smash 150 feet. You smash 150 feet, you're medaling at your state final. Now all of a sudden you're medaling at that state final and you're starting to get interest from coaches. You're getting interest from college level coaches. They wanna see if you can throw 170 feet. They wanna see if you can throw 180 feet. And now all you've gotta do is get back to that board and sit there, lay out those goals, lay out that program, and start working your butt off that off season. If you want help with your strength training program and you want even more information about these benchmark lifts, head over to throwsuniversity.com. You can pick up a strength training based program or your copy of the Ultimate Throwers Assessment. That's going to help you become a better thrower. Until next time, guys, peace.